Okay, welcome back to our podcast. Today we have a guest, Angad. He is. I'll let you introduce yourself in a minute, but Prakash is bowed out today, and we're just gonna start talking about some of our history up here. We're both long timers here. We've gone through some product journey here on how to build from a small company to a large company and managing roadmaps and timelines and things like that. So I don't know, Angad, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, really excited to be here. I've been listening to the podcast that you and Prakash have put out over the last few months.
I'm sorry.
It's been relatively good. So no, I'm excited to be here. So I've been at Pure for 9.5 years, slightly shorter than you have, and currently I lead product management for our digital experience business unit.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and we actually both were in the FlashArray business unit here. We've been at Pure for a long time. And I think for me, what's been interesting as an engineer is watching us build a product from, kind of scratch to go into a very well-established ecosystem and building that roadmap, trying to understand how to enact change and so on. And so I'm excited because I have a lot of questions for you. Because
Absolutely, right. And like you just mentioned, when we talk about roadmap and going from a small company to a large company, at the same time, you're going from having a few customers to a lot of customers and a lot of commitments, and your revenues, your booking numbers for the years have gone up. Managing a roadmap when you're small is very different from managing a roadmap when you're larger.
Yep.
So yeah, it'll be exciting to talk about this.
Yeah. So if we can go back maybe through history a little bit, just kind of rewind a little bit, I want to share, and we've never talked about this, so I'm going to tell you what it was like for me being at Pure early on. It was, from my perspective, we were building an awesome system. We're engineering things. We got to think about architecture and design and all of that. And like features were these things that, PM would kind of like bug us about every once in a while. Be like, hey, you guys got to go deliver snapshots.
Not much has changed, has it?
And so what I'm curious about is how did you, we have a very strong engineering community at Pure, particularly in the early days. And from my perspective, I felt like people in your role had to basically argue with us to do anything. How did you navigate, moving Pure through what was actually a very large problem space of, hey, our product needs a lot of things. Our engineers can only kind of do one thing at a time, and they have a lot of basic technology just to build along the way. Like, how did you even think about that?
Yeah, so, the storage industry has been there for a long, long time. And the basic core capabilities were well defined in terms of what they are. Now,
Yeah.
how you implement it is very different, but what they were is pretty well defined. So coming into a small company which is trying to compete against incumbents, you have to come up with a roadmap which first of all covers the basics. It gives the customers at least the basic things that they need,
Yep.
while at the same time trying to build in some differentiation, right? Because your customer can get async replication from you, they can get it from somebody else, but how are you different?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's where the main things that a good product management team can get in. How do you differentiate yourself against the competitors? How do you meet the customers where they are and what they are willing to accept from you?
Yeah, it's funny, now that I reflect back on it, I'm kind of shocked we got to where we are because we didn't have a lot of features to start with. We were a block storage device, and it almost doesn't matter what industry you're in. I think when you're a disruptor in a well-established field, you're going to come in with, your one or two novel things, but people expect it all. How did you,
They do. We actually had a couple of things working in our favor. Really foundational aspects of Pure Storage. First of all was obviously flash.
Right.
It gave us benefits of low latency, high throughput, issues that you get with disk around tail latencies, things of that nature, you automatically got with that, and we were the only ones doing it. But secondly, which I think is actually even bigger than any of that, was the simplicity we brought to the industry, right? The fact that our customers they didn't have to go through 550-page manuals to understand how to set the storage system up.
Yeah.
It made a huge, huge difference.
Actually, so would you say we took our lack of features as a differentiator in some sense, right? It's like,
In a way, it helped. But again, since between then and now, when we are full featured,
yeah.
our reference guides aren't that big
simple.
still.
That's
We
right.
are still extremely simple, and that's what's keeping us going where we are.
Yeah, yeah. So, did you have from your perspective, do you think that our, program management and kind of thinking of how we develop the product and fast forwarding a little bit more towards where we are now, like, did you roadmap this all out? Were you saying, okay, again, because I was just the dude working on like garbage collection inside the system, right? I didn't care about features. And from my perspective, we've kind of followed what seems like a well thought out plan to get to kind of where we are. Was that intentional, or do you think we did that organically?
No, so parts of it are intentional, right? When you're building out a strategy for your product, like I said, the storage industry had defined, in a sense, what needs to be done, right? But we added our own flavor to it, and we added some new capabilities in it. What you have defined is over the next 3 years, these are the steps that you need to take to get to that 3-year goal,
Yep.
right? But if you ask me, at that time, did I know what we would be doing 10 years from today? Would Fusion be what it is, and how we believe it's going to change the industry? Not at that time. I mean, we had conversations around, management across a fleet and all, but would it take this kind of flavor? No, definitely not.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely interesting going through all of that. And I think one of the things that was also interesting was, for example, one of the things I always remember was the product team would always say, hey, if you could get us this feature, this is a market we can expand into. Can you get it to us, in 6 months, or you can get it to us in 12 months, or, you'd kind of keep beating the bandwagon on that. Did you ever, how did you try to think about when it was important for us to, as a company, deliver the next feature? So we can pick almost any of our features along the way, right? But because I never wanted to give you anything.
The default answer you would get from a PM is sooner the better.
Okay.
Right? But in reality, if you think about how we try to manage the roadmap, right? You're trying to intercept a customer in their journey. You have, and especially when you're starting off as a young company and you don't have too many customers, you're not well known. The customers who have invested in you have taken a chance.
It's true.
Right? You don't want to let them down. Right? And so in those earlier days, it was how do you fulfill the commitments or the expectations of those customers? And then as you grow and as you have a lot more customers, then you're trying to, then the competition hits it, right? That's when you're like, okay, if you want to compete in Europe, active cluster.
This is one of the ones I was remembering.
Would have been the most important thing at that point, right? So yes, we had grown in the U.S. We were known in the U.S. And we had, we were gaining market share, but we weren't in EMEA.
Yep.
So active cluster was a big thing if you wanted to grow internationally, right? So that's when that became a high priority. So it depends on where you are in the stage of the company. It depends on your customers' needs at that time. And again, how the market is changing, right? If you think about what we did just last year, when the world was talking about AI, and that was the only thing that people were talking about, all the work that the teams did around AI Copilot and got it out in a hurry for last year's Accelerate, it wasn't something that we had thought about 3 years back that would be in the roadmap, but it was the need, and so we had to make space for it in the roadmap, right? So that's how some of these things play out.
And you need some flexibility to kind of change course quickly.
Absolutely.
And so But kind of before we transition to know kind of where we are, there was also this period where, we were adding all these features. We were trying to go as fast as we can. We were trying to address these market needs, as you're mentioning. And I think this is natural to any company's growth and any product's growth. We started to get a little bit ahead of ourselves in terms of adding features and how easy it was to either get you another, as my counterpart, give you the next feature. It's like, well, to do that, I'd have to put on even more Band-Aids. Or we're starting to see some of the decisions we've made to deliver something in the short term start to hurt us over time in terms of code quality or maintainability or any of those things. What are your thoughts on, how do we address that as an engineering?
Yeah, so tech is always a common discussion point between head of engineering and head of product, right? How do you work through something of that nature? And it's a question of what the issue is and where you are in your journey. So the way I would explain, at least the way our current strategy is, there are things that we need to build for near-term revenue. And there are some tech that related activities, especially when it comes to quality, availability, security, that I am not one who's ready to ignore, right? If there are tech debt issues that might impact how the UI looks today, maybe I'll say, revenue would be more important. Again, it depends on what it is, right?
Yeah.
So long-winded way of saying it really depends what we are trying to address. Security and availability is the top thing for me, and especially what the DX provides our customers, where you have a lot of phone home telemetry data, keeping that secure. It is our bread and butter, and that is someplace where I would definitely not want to be in a situation where we get in trouble.
By the way, I do think that makes you somewhat unique in my experience as a product manager, because I think you actually care about what I would call you understand why engineers need these things, why we advocate for these things. Is that something that you think is a core skill set in your domain in general, or do you think that's unique to you?
No, it does become. I'll try to give a little bit of history about myself that I think might explain where we are. So my background is in chip design, hardware engineering. You don't screw up in hardware engineering because if you do,
Yeah.
you don't have a job, pretty much, right? And from engineering, I moved to product management in hardware. Again, you're defining things which have been well thought out, and you don't change course once. And when I said hardware engineering, I did actual chip design, ASICs and microprocessors. So you worry about doing things which are not scalable and which can get you into trouble,
Yep.
right? And I think that's made me a little bit more cautious about things like I just mentioned around availability and security. These are things that to me are core and fundamental, and it's a bad security incident can get a customer ticked off on you and not want to be your customer.
Yep.
You don't want to mess with that.
Actually, it's so funny that you're saying that, because I obviously have a very similar hardware kind of lineage background. And for people who don't know, like, we're both definitely perfectionists. We both are deep we like to understand all the details. But I also wonder if that makes us more alike in these things than is good, right? So I think that one of the things that comes to mind is, I might be able to get you to say, hey, we need to pause and slow down because, hey, we need to go solve all of these technical problems, and I could go explain them to you, and you'll understand where I'm coming from. You'll empathize, and you'll be like, all right, yeah.
One thing I can tell you for sure, I'm a capitalist, right? At the end of the day, I still need to bring in the dollars. My boss looks at me for that. So there's always going to be that tussle.
Okay. So the leeway you're gonna give me or that experience is always within some sort of
Yes.
bounds.
Yes.
Right.
And that level of friction does need to exist between the product team and the engineering team.
Yeah.
Right? We need to keep each other honest, and we need to drive the business.
Yeah. And kind of getting back to the idea of how we set the roadmap, I think a challenge that you and I both face is trying to think several years out and say, hey, these are the challenges the company faces. This is what we need to navigate, and but also doing it in a way where it's not completely open-ended without, accountability and timelines and deadlines and all of those things, right? So, do you have a strategy on how to extract, some sort of timeliness from our engineering teams in terms of?
So what I figured out is, at least the way I look at it, there are two things, right? There has to be a lot of clarity that you provide, and you have to provide the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Engineers, by nature, mostly are very logical, and they need to understand what value they're bringing into the system, right? And so if you're able to explain what it is, and it could be a business outcome, right? It could be a business outcome, and people do understand it. They do know that at the end of the day, how the company does, how the business unit performs, reflects on them and has an impact on them, their careers. So everybody generally wants to do the right thing. You just need to be clear and honest and just get the support on things like this.
Yeah. I think for me, what I found is, because I think as I've matured in my career as on the engineering side, and I think you've joked with me before that I think you see me sometimes as like a half a PM, which I don't think I am. maybe I'm like a 5% PM or something. But I think even from the engineering side, I think it's really important to start to understand, what's the market fit for what you're working on? Why are you building some of the things
Absolutely.
you're working on? What the trade-offs are? But for me, I try to then anchor that back to, well, what is it that we as a company or as a product team need to go be developing over the next several years? How do we kind of steer the ship, right? Because I think over time, you just I feel like you go in a direction. The engineering team is just, you're marching down. The next obvious thing to do is just right in front of you. Just keep going, you keep going, you keep going. But eventually you're not working on anything that's, you're kind of working on incremental things, more and more incremental things. So one of the challenges that I think from a roadmap perspective is interesting is thinking pretty far down the road, let's say 2 years down the road, but then helping the team understand how the thing you're working on, over time, we need to shift it to a new direction.
Yeah.
And it might end up with something completely different than you started with, right? And so that's a challenge that I've been facing. And I'm just curious, I think I tend to be very incremental by nature in how to address these things. I don't know if this is something you think about. Or.
No, I do, right? Because one of the things when you set up a strategy, a 3-year, 5-year plan in terms of where you want to go, what a product might look like, and you explain it to everybody, right? It's not only engineers, but you explain it around the company and to try to get people, behind you on those activities. When you have to change direction, it is not the best feeling, right? Because you have painted a vision which people have started to accept and follow, and then when you change direction, all of a sudden, it's not good. You lose some level of credibility, right? So you want to avoid doing that, but sometimes you have to, right? Sometimes you have to, and again, it goes back to the statement I made earlier. It's about being honest and being clear about what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yep.
Right? What is the outcome that you're trying to achieve? And most people will accept it.
Yeah, I think, and by the way, I think this is something that we live daily, right? We're a hardware company by origin, and we're turning into a services-oriented company. I think this is something that trying to explain this to the rest of the company, trying to get them to understand why we're asking for some of the things we're asking for, is a bit of a challenge, right? And so it's I find that for me, there's two things. One is trying to say, okay, hey, this is where we're trying to go. This is, how do I explain that clearly? But like you said, how do you take everyone along for the ride? I might actually be saying that what you're building is completely wrong, but I can't say that out loud. Right? I have to steer you towards the new path, right? And so I think services has been a very interesting journey for me of trying to understand, like, we've built these hardware appliances. We've traditionally sold them to their customer. We want them to not even know about those things.
Yeah.
We want to hide all of these things, right? And those are the things we've built. Those are the things we're passionate about.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, that's one of the roadmap journeys that I think we're on right now.
And it's a very, very exciting journey. To me, it has been the most fun I've had in a long time to try to change how people think, change how our customers adopt our products, right, and how they work with the products. So the services part of it has been really, really exciting.
Yeah.
So if I may ask you, since
you've
been asking all of these questions, right, as chief architect, you do care a lot about basically having a healthy product, right? And you have the same pressures in terms of having to deliver different capabilities that the business is asking of you. And how do you sort of logically decide that you really want to push for a pause in feature development to look at tech debt and basically force my hand on taking up some of those engineering challenges?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to own up to the answer, but the real answer is it's become a gut feel, which is, I'm never going to win these arguments ever again. But to me, complex systems, and I think a lot of people who know me will find that might be confused by this answer, because I think it's really important to understand how systems work. But at the end of the day, they start to tell you that there's a problem. And so, for example, you're trying to develop. So back in the day, active cluster. Going back to that, right? We're trying to build a system that two arrays are in lockstep. That we perfectly understand which one's in control. If one fails, the other one can take over. And you start just thinking through in your head, like, okay, well, what if scenario A happens? What if scenario B happens? What if and you're just like, I can't actually think about it. I can't rationalize it. I can't. And so you start to realize you're not in good shape. You're like, I don't have quick answers to these really complicated technical questions. And over time, I have to just own up to product management and say, like, this is not going to end up in a good place. I, as an engineer, don't have high confidence that the next thing that I'm going to build, I'm going to build in a way that I can make you not worry about its reliability or availability or anything like that. It honestly just starts to talk to you. That's the way I feel about it.
I think what you just said defines and explains why we are the company we are, why our products are so good, so stable, and actually most of our customers don't even have to worry about them once they've been installed, right? It's being able to own up and say, guys, let's take a pause. This is going to cause problems, right? That everybody can't do that.
Yeah, and actually I think that is a cultural thing at Pure, to be honest, that I've personally experienced there's been multiple things we've gone through like this, right? Where it's like, hey, this part of our company is not working well. This part of our product is not working well. This part of our data landscape is not working well. We need to invest in a multi-year journey to change it and improve it.
Yeah.
And an odd thing that I've experienced at this company, and I think it's something that other people should really pay attention to, is there's a appetite to go after these hard problems. So I've definitely been in other places where you bring up these complex problems, and because the timeline to resolution is really beyond even understanding, people don't invest in it. Yeah, they don't. It's like, okay, this is years away, but I have next year's problem. Like, don't worry about it right now, right? So I can say that when there's definitely, you're right. I think there's an openness for people to raise these concerns at Pure.
Yeah, and wonder if some of this has to do with just, you know, in the initial days, we built a company to solve customers' problems. And I'm not talking about a technical problem, but the problem on how they were dealing with storage and all of the issues with having to replace storage every few years and you know, all the nightmare that customers had to go through. And we were trying to be the opposite.
Yep.
Right? We didn't want to, so in a sense, we were trying to replace everything that legacy storage had given customers.
Yep.
And since that is how our original culture was, we don't want to become that legacy, right? Which does mean that every now and then you take a pause and revisit, fix things, then move on.
Yeah. Actually, when you mentioned that, there's another thing that I think also has helped my journey, at least at Pure, in understanding how to advocate for these things. And something I've never really thought about until now is from an engineering culture perspective. So I came from a chip design company as well. I don't think at that world I knew who my customer was. Like, I think in the abstract I did, like, somebody's going to buy a chip somehow. I don't really know. Like, but why do they care about this feature or that feature? Right. Or what is their experience? I think something we've done well here, and I think it's something that definitely should be replicated, is engineers here are expected to understand the customer. I think they're expected to understand what is the value you're offering, how are you making someone else's life better, all of those things. And I think that helps us also understand when you're trying to steer us down a path in a 2-year roadmap or timeline, I'm connected to that, right? I know that has a connection. So I think that's been an interesting part of it. So I don't know. Anything else you want to wrap on or?
No, I think it's pretty much, how you frame the last piece of what you just said about engineers having a good view of what a customer needs as well. And I think that's what makes it so much more fun for me as a product guy as well, to be able to work hand in hand with with our engineering teams, having them understand the problems we are trying to solve. That's when you get the best results.
Yeah, you have PM and engineering argue, something good is going to happen. Hopefully.
Exactly. That's the goal.
Right. So,
yeah.
Well, thank you for guesting with us, and I hope that everyone enjoyed that discussion. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me.